Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Birgit Kloos, the President and CEO of The Right Place, and welcome and thank you for joining us for another installment of our Navigate 2020 webinar series. The Right Place was founded 35 years ago as your regional economic development organization and to also help our companies through difficult times like we are experiencing now. We are used to meet in person often, but we obviously had to go to an alternative, and so we created this webinar series to keep our community and our business and community leaders informed and bring you the latest expertise and resources so that you can learn from others and how they are navigating themselves and their companies through these very unusual times. Today, our topic is when culture goes digital. This actually started the idea started with a conversation that I had with Rick Keys, the CEO of Meijer, who of course is one of our panelists today, when he said to me in a conversation a few weeks ago, I know we can manage this company remotely, but I don't know how we can keep our culture. And it was something that totally resonated with me because obviously The Right Place is an organization with over 30 team members, and we're asking ourselves the same question. So for over the past 12 months, almost 8 now, our region's companies, you who are on the webinar today, you've been navigating challenges and opportunities in a virtual environment, and it's an entirely new landscape, I would say, for 99% of us. And so today we've asked a group of local business leaders to share their experiences and effective tips for maintaining your culture and how do you promote employee wellness during these difficult times, and how do you effectively communicate? And those three really do go together. And I don't know who said it, but culture trumps strategy any day. And over the years that we've been with our team members, we have established relationship capital. And we're drawing down on that relationship capital because we have worked together so many years and we have established a strong culture. So we have today with us three great business leaders from our community, and I'm pleased to be joined by Rick Keys, the President and CEO of Meijer, Dr. Young Kim, the President of Mercy Health St. Mary's. Dr. Kim, it still would be easier to just say St. Mary's. We still do. And Sean Crawley, the co-CEO of Atomic Object. They will discuss with us how their companies have shifted and adapted to the current circumstances. How are they managing through these difficult times? And what has been working in their organizations and companies and what hasn't. After the presentation, Cindy Brown, our Vice President of Talent Initiatives at The Right Place, will facilitate a Q&A. And I'm sure we'll have more questions than we'll have time for, but there will be an opportunity to also answer some of those unanswered questions later. You can also add questions anytime during the presentations, and just go down in the chat room and ask your questions or make your comments. With that, I would be pleased to ask Rick Keys to commence with this presentation. Rick?
Great. Well, thank you, Birgit. And it really is great to be joining the group here. And as Birgit mentioned, we were talking a bit about how Meijer is running its business through this pandemic. And for us, culture is so important. You know, as a family-run business here in West Michigan, we like to say it's our secret sauce. And as Birgit mentioned, our teams are responding very well to working remotely. We essentially have shut down our offices and I have very few people in the offices, but have been able to handle the tactical challenges of our business. The question of culture is one that I think requires a lot of intentionality. And so if we could go to the next slide, one of the things I wanted to do just to ground us in the discussion when we talk about culture, for us, it's, we have our stores certainly, which I think most people relate to and maybe are shopping, but we also have our corporate offices, our distribution centers, manufacturing facilities that we're all trying to kind of bring this culture together. Meijer is a company, we have about 70,000 team members, most of which would work out in the field in our stores, but we have about 2,500 to 3,000 team members that work here in West Michigan in the variety of corporate offices that we have in Walker. And so, culture is very important. It's central to the work that we do, and we want to make sure that we're focusing on that across the organization. If you go to the next slide, I think this will resonate with a lot of people that are on the call. We're all working differently. And so you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, this is probably something that's very familiar to you if you're formerly working in an office environment. We have thousands of team members now that are doing this on a daily basis. And it really kind of takes away from that interaction that we were having, that feel that you got in our offices where you could run into your fellow colleagues down the hall and talk about some of the challenges that you're facing. For most of our team members, this is on the right-hand side. You think about the stores, it's also very difficult and very different in our stores, the environment that our team members are working in, wearing a mask for 8 to 10 hours a day, being behind sneeze guards or screens, et cetera. It's really required us to think differently about how we're working. And so culture is something that, how do we keep that going in the midst of all of these changes? If you go to the next slide. For us, we're a very purpose-driven company. This is a slide or a depiction that we use to think about how we run our business. And I'd really ask you just to focus at the center, which is really around enriching lives in the communities that we serve. And so our family is very focused on making a difference in the communities where we operate and impacting lives. And those lives are our customers, the community organizations that we partner with, as well as our team members. And so how do we keep that going when things are so different? How do we keep that present and top of mind for our team, and that they really do feel like they are making a difference in the communities that we serve? If you go to the next slide, what I would argue is that, and one of the learnings, and we've always prided ourselves on communication and transparency within the organization. I thought we did a lot of communicating pre-COVID. I would say, on steroids now around how much we are communicating to our teams. I would say easily triple or quadruple the amount of communications that are going out across our organization. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were very clear about was that when we come out of this, we want our team members and our customers to know that we put their safety first. So first and foremost, that was top of mind. That's what we wanted to make sure we were communicating. We also wanted to make sure that we were communicating everything in connection with our purpose. And so we were very, very intentional around making sure that we were communicating everything that we were doing. How were we enriching lives in the communities that we serve? And really pleased with the results that we've seen as a result of that. I would also say that no matter how much you communicate, it's never enough. I mentioned we were up probably 4x the amount of communication that we normally do, and it still feels like there's more that could be done. We're being asked for more and more communication. So as you think about culture, I would keep communication at the top of the list. If you go to the next slide, we really wanted to also make sure that we kept that personal connection and within our recognition, and how are we celebrating the work that's being done by our team. So early on in the pandemic, which we'd really not heard, and was a point of pride for us, was being thought of as an essential worker. And so there was a lot of opportunity for pride and recognition there, but we wanted to keep that going. And so we didn't want to just rest on that. And so really every week to every 2 weeks, there's some form of recognition, some event, something that we're doing that really lets our team know how much we care and appreciate them for the work that they're doing. But it also ties back to our purpose. So we never miss the opportunity to connect our teams back to our purpose. One of the stats that I'm really proud of is through the pandemic, we had a survey we do every year around being a greatest place to work. Many of you may take that survey, and we took that survey this year in May, and we're really concerned about, how's that going to go with being in the middle of a pandemic? How are people going to take that survey? We actually went up 900 basis points in I look forward to coming to work each and every day, which was something that really blew us away. And I think it has everything to do with this recognition and communication component. If you go to the next slide, one of the things that I am very concerned about and was part of the discussion that Birgit and I were having is, eventually fatigue starts to set in, and we started to see that with our teams. We're now in the 8th month of this pandemic, and it gets old and it gets tiring. And this is a picture of Fred. We have a statue of Fred Meyer out in front of our office. Team members randomly will go out and put hats or scarves on him when it gets cold, but winter is coming. We're all going to be locked down a bit. We're not going to be able to do some of the things that we've been doing before. And how is that going to weigh on our team? And how are we going to keep this fun environment, this communication, and this positivity and pride going when the days get shorter, it gets darker outside, you're not able to eat outside in the restaurants, et cetera. And so I would just caution everybody that that's really an opportunity. If you go to the next slide, we created really a framework that really was focused on how are we going to make sure that we keep this going as we go through the winter months. And so we really brought a team together. We're focused on team culture and connection. I would just draw your attention to the bottom. We think that there are 4 key categories: health and wellness, connectivity, managing the day, and inspiration and fun are all areas that we think we can really highlight and focus on in the coming months. It's going to make a difference. I just have a few examples with each of them. Health and wellness is one that I'm very concerned about. We are really focused on calling attention to that. If you could go to the next slide. There's going to be people that are really going to struggle. And how do we make sure that we're focused on those individuals? We're going to be bringing in speakers. We're going to have Bonnie Woodrick from I Understand. We're going to have multiple sessions every month that are going to be focused on health and well-being. And this is something that we're going to be making a concerted effort towards. If you go to the next slide, connectivity is another one. How are we going to make sure that our teams connect? We all miss those personal connections in the hallways or in the office. And so we've really worked on providing platforms and training for our teams. We're expanding our use of Yammer, which is a social network within our environment. How are we going to make sure that we have opportunities for people to get into breakout rooms and meet people and see people that they normally haven't seen, and really giving them the tools to really connect with their fellow team members. The next slide really speaks to managing the day. And I don't know about you, but at the end of the day, it's really draining when you're on a full day of Zoom calls. We're putting in rules around making sure things like the 12 to 1 hour are reserved and no meetings between 12 and 1 so that people can get a break. Ending meetings 10 minutes before the hour so that people have time to decompress before they get to the next meeting. All little tips that can really help. The next slide is really all about having fun. So I don't want to miss out on those core activities that we really all enjoyed. So we're going to be doing things like really promoting the Michigan State game. We've got speakers coming in pre-game. We're doing cooking sessions with our chef where people can dial in and learn a new recipe. Lots of fun activities where people can connect and work on that culture. And then the next slide, really the final slide, is we're trying to say we're going to be very intentional about this. Every week, every month, as we go through the remainder of the pandemic, we're going to have activities where people can connect, engage with each other, and really focus in on our amazing culture. And so I think the biggest call out I would have is really intentionality and really thinking about these upcoming months. How do we stay connected and keep things fresh and new? Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Now we're going to hear from Dr. Kim, who's going to be speaking on wellness and well-being. Dr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cindy. When it comes to colleague well-being, especially when culture goes digital like this, at Mercy Health, or as Birgit would prefer it, at St. Mary's, it really starts with our mission, our vision, and our values, our culture, really. And in this unprecedented time, led us to pursue 3 sets of kind of augmented actions. And if we go to the next page, you see that when it comes to our mission and our core values on the left, they're kind of what you might expect a healthcare organization to be. I just want to speak a little bit about the integrity or the stewardship core value, because to a lot of people, that's kind of code for kind of finances and expense management. Our core value of stewardship actually goes specifically beyond that and includes the taking care of the human resources that have been entrusted to us, and that's our colleagues. And so that's part of what I mean when I say that colleague well-being, really flows from our mission and core values. And if you go to the next page, which is our vision, you see that in the bold in the middle, it talks about the health of our communities and also each person we serve. And so this is at not only just a global level, but at an individual level, which again points to well-being. And the reason I'm using the word well-being as opposed to wellness, going to the next page, is that just from a definitional standpoint, wellness is super important, especially if you're a healthcare organization like us. It's, both health or the absence of illness, but well-being includes that, but also, goes beyond that to talk about the joy and the success and fulfillment from life. And, this has been an unprecedented year. And and on the next page, just want to share that in addition to kind of COVID and taking care of our community's COVID and non-COVID related needs, and also the racial and other inequity that I think we're all continuing to grapple with, we also did a new electronic medical record this year. And as a part of that, had to do restructuring as a part of that. And so what that means is that we decided as a leadership team that we really need to take a series of additional actions to support our colleague well-being at this time. And the first set of those actions was actually on the next page, specifically about our culture and promulgating it. The great thing about Mercy Health St. Mary's, given our mission, our values, and our vision, is that our culture, just simply writ, is that our culture is one where we put our patients' needs first, and we support one another as colleagues always. And if you think about that, that culture naturally promotes colleague well-being. And part of the reason that is first, in kind of an uncertain, complex milieu like the one that we've been in, it really gives us focus and confidence around what it is that we need to do, why we need to focus on those areas, and also how we do that. And that really supports joy and success. That also gives us the opportunity in the midst of everything to really look at all the successes that we've had in this difficult year. One of the great things about challenges is that challenges provide teams and organizations the opportunity to come together and rise to them. And we took time to specifically acknowledge the successes that we had, and all of us really felt great fulfillment and joy at that. Of course, COVID is a tremendous safety challenge, a tremendous health challenge. And so, our culture around putting patients' needs first and also supporting one another really called us to figure out, hey, what are the practices that we're going to put in place that allow us to deliver great care the way we've done, and also do it in an extra safe way, not only for our patients and their family and visitors, but also for our colleagues. It's really focused us and helped us to be successful, especially in a setting where there was a time when the guidelines from the various official agencies was kind of all over the place. The next part is that really it reinforced that we have to take care of ourselves too, reminding one another that we need to do that. And that's, sleep, exercise, actually using paid time off, which is something that was a challenge before COVID and really became a challenge afterwards. And that leaders, we not only have to, talk the talk, but we have to set the example by walking that talk. And finally, what that means is that we've been referring to our culture more than ever in trying to figure out what we do and how we do it. That's also led to, the second set of actions that we do on the next page, which is just working even harder to promote clarity and also provide for a greater sense of community, because, we have a lot of colleagues actually who always had to work from work, and we take care of patients. And so although there was a lot of that we were able to do using technology like telemedicine, particularly at St. Mary's Hospital, that is in person. And so we had a set of colleagues who really were working from home, and a set of colleagues who were working for work. And to try to knit all that together, we did a number of things. And the first thing is our leadership structure at Mercy Health is really around distributed leadership, which means that our leaders who are closest to the action really are best positioned to decide what to do and how to do it. And we added to that this incident command structure to try to provide for coordination, around the new policies and things that it seemed like for a while there on a daily basis. We were trying to figure out what to do as things were changing. And then we cascaded that with our local leadership teams. We did virtual town halls for members of our broader community, at the leadership level, for all of our providers, for all colleagues, just so everyone was on the same page and was fully updated as to what was going on at the appropriate level of detail, had a chance to learn and, pose questions, so that leaders had a chance to provide clarity, and just as importantly, so that we had an opportunity to acknowledge the great efforts and the successes that we were having and appreciate what everyone was doing together. As a part of that, we also increased rounding, which is what we call when people go to the different parts of the hospital and the practices, just to see how things are going and to connect with all of our colleagues who are really at the front lines. There are different types of a gemba, which is, just going where the action is kind of what that means. We specifically asked our senior leaders to be out and about more, to be more visible than to connect. And we had a third kind of explicit rounding, which we called resiliency rounds, where we had our leaders paired with another colleague who was specifically trained in behavioral health, counseling and support, so that we were able to provide that level of assistance also. This helped us tremendously from a visibility standpoint. The informal interactions really made it easier to just create a sense of community and to be clear about things. And we also learned a lot in doing that too. We also did the traditional written and video updates. We also did these wonderful appreciation events. One of my favorite memories was when me and some other members of our senior leadership team, we came in between 11 p.m. and midnight, which I have to tell you is well past my bedtime. And as a part of the appreciation event, invited our colleagues on third shift to come who worked, the overnight shift, to receive mass and caramel corn, which I think everyone really loved. It was really a wonderful way to connect and also to talk about what was going on and how we were approaching it. And finally, we decided that we needed to form an explicit work team, which we called the People and Culture Team. And it's a team that's being led at the highest levels by our Chief Human Resources Officer, our Chief Medical Officer, and our Chief Nursing Officer. The third set of actions was really around, adding to the already broad array of colleague support programs we already had in place. And that's because early on we were seeing that as people were going above and beyond, and as things were unpredictable, our colleagues just had greater needs, and it was just hard to predict exactly what they would be. So we really needed to be more flexible and agile about those. And so one of the things that we did was that we really increased our PTO and really urge our colleagues to use it. So for example, being in healthcare, what that means is that I think, at least I hope, everyone is having their folks who are diagnosed to be COVID positive to self-quarantine and do contact tracing. And so for us, in addition to making sure that we were doing that, we created a new class of PTO that people could use for that so that it would not affect their other PTO. So that's an example of PTO that we added. And we do have a formal employee assistance program through CareBridge and some others. And so we added capacity to those so that we could respond more quickly. And then we also added some more informal means for colleagues to connect, including creating a new colleague health line, which we initially thought would be helpful just in case a colleague had a very specific question about COVID and what that meant for them, their family, or their friends, because we got a lot of questions about that. But we found that it was also helpful for helping our colleagues figure out where and how to get care. And so, we're continuing to expand that even now. We also created a colleague emergency assistance program that, just like at an organizational level, COVID and going virtual in so many areas created a lot of new expenses for us organizationally. It created a lot of expenses for us individually too. And knowing that we have colleagues who have just more difficulty than others in flexing up with those, whether it's, needing to get additional better broadband internet access so they can be effective working from work and the technology, or new childcare related needs as things around school changed. We created an emergency assistance program based on resources from St. Mary's, but also from the community, so that colleagues had access to that. And, you know, we're adding to these additional programs on a regular basis. In fact, later this afternoon, we're announcing another set of programs to further support our colleagues. And so, you know, the way we went around about, you know, supporting our colleague well-being in this time when culture has to go digital was to go back to what our mission, our core values, and our vision call us to do, really relying on our culture in this unprecedented time and, you know, pursuing these 3 sets of actions. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Cindy, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. Both Rick and Dr. Kim stressed communication and the importance of increasing communication. Our final panelist, Sean Crowley, will speak directly to this. Sean, it's all yours.
Thanks, Cindy. So before we get into communication, a little bit about Atomic Object. If we could go to the next slide. Atomic's a software product development consultancy. We're about 20 years old. We're in 3 locations, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, and Chicago. We have 73 atoms. Our work's highly collaborative. It's team-based. We have open offices that fosters that collaboration amongst teams, within teams and across teams. We're an employee-owned company, and we've practiced open book management for quite some time, so transparency is very high. We have strong connections to one another, very relational, and the general expectation, even though we're a tech company prior to COVID, was that you do your work on site. We've always offered good workplace flexibility, but we do our work, the collaborative work is best done on site. So we go to the next slide, a little bit about our culture. So one of the many credits I can give our founder, Carl Erickson, since he started the company in 2001, was a strong focus on culture and the elements of culture. He had recently, through his many years leading Atomic, looked back and extracted a culture framework, which I linked to at the end of this slide deck. And it's focusing each of these blocks as a component or element of the culture framework with the absence of goals. And those are the more surface things, the objectives we focus on every year. But this is really the bedrock on what we base our goals on. Our culture was very strong going into the pandemic. This culture was not just words on a wall. This was very much lived and visible in our work. So if we can go to the next slide. As we transitioned to a remote work, I remember the day vividly, sending an email out to the organization on March 11th that our offices were effectively closed as of the next day. Get your things to be able to do your client work, and we're moving into an all remote context. Our teams immediately demonstrated the ability to do work remotely, living one of our own values. They were able to get up and running by the next day. I expected we were headed into a period of crisis and uncertainty. In hindsight, I honestly didn't believe it would be this long. But we knew coming into that weekend after March 11th that we needed to start working scenarios and strategy. And during that weekend, working with my partner, Mike, our founder, Carl, who still is very active as an executive chairman, mentoring and guiding Mike and me as we lead the business, we put our culture right front and center as true north to guide us. I knew this would get difficult, and without having something to ground and guide us, we could get lost. We also then took a look at, like an org structure, an accountability chart, how communication generally flows through the organization. We put that out front and center too, to say we want to respect this and also know when we're challenging it. Long story short, the culture has come through this strong. It's those other things, how we communicate, how we organize our work, and those accountability structures where we've had to be very, very flexible. We didn't know the culture was strong, but we also suspected it would get challenged. And one of our values of thinking long term, we decided we want to call it. What does the future look like? And we wanted to manage our path into this all remote work with an intention to return to on-site work. And so what did we think would be challenged in our culture? It was really those cultural elements, like down in our purpose of being a source of fulfillment, forming strong connections to people, being able to exchange respect, recognition, and appreciation, being a force for good in our communities. Some of our values like teaching and learning, acting transparently, traits, being relational, being trusting, all of this gets challenging in an all remote context. And then the thinking behind our long-term goal of returning to the office is that other tech companies at different times in this pandemic have decided to go fully remote. Lower cost structures, don't have to operate facilities, can source talent from a broader area. But we knew our people opted in to be in an in-person culture, to be in that relational, collaborative culture and team style of work. And we also know that our work, we're commonly doing innovation projects, early phase 0, phase 1 projects. And this really benefits from in-person collaboration to go through the divergent and convergent discussions and ideation that's inherent to innovation and new product development in cross-functional teams. I think other type of work, highly individualized work, operational work, you can do that more effectively remotely with asynchronous check-ins. If we could go to the next slide. As we started to communicate, it was, what are the goals of communication? And like others have mentioned, the frequency is increased. But the purpose behind why we're increasing that frequency is to provide the clarity to help people have the psychological safety and to have our people, our atoms, and our clients feel stability while this crisis is going on around us in other areas of our lives. We also wanted our people to still feel socially connected and part of something bigger than themselves while they're going through many forms of physical or social distancing in other areas of their lives. And then of course, we need to fulfill our promise to our clients of delivering them an excellent product and a great experience building it with us and effectively get our work done. Some principles, if we go to the next slide, is we wanted to communicate with transparency, timely and frequent, be early when people have questions about what's your point of view on different opportunities or benefits or stimulus things being discussed in the media, to be on top of that, have a point of view on that, communicate early, communicate often. We decided not only with our communication style, but with our decisions to favor clarity and simplicity over complexity. We always in our communication wanted to connect our decisions to an element of our culture. And for our key decisions and information, for instance, starting to change around some rules and guidelines for our paid time off, we wanted that to come direct from Mike and me, instead of where we would commonly cascade it out through different managing partners. And we did this because we wanted synchronous communication and we wanted to make sure we were adhering to our goals and our principles. We oftentimes would look out to our distributed management and leaders team, the managing partners of our offices and some of our company leaders, and make sure we had all eyes on these communication pieces before they went out so people were aware of them and could support them, but then we'd send them more directly. So we were collapsing a little bit of our modest hierarchy. We also decided out on the front lines, right, where teams are doing the work or managing partners are managing their offices, to have them tackle the social connection and work enablement practices and tools. Allow people to experiment and share practices. That allows broad experimentation, sharing of what works, and then feeding the things that are winners. And we wanted to make sure we were direct in asking people to work on that and solve those challenges, and would promote the things that were working. So let's go to the next slide and look at a few specific changes as leaders and managers. And you know what I'll do is I'll speak to a couple of these, and if people are interested in some of the others, we can hit that up in the Q&A. But I can say like a co-CEO update that Mike and I would give. We used to do this quarterly. Like I mentioned, we're open book managed. We would go over high-level direction and vision for the future. Some combination of Mike or myself or our office level MPs would go over the previous quarter's financials, accomplishments, etc. And we set the big picture at a quarterly pace. We were now setting this at a weekly pace, where we would give everyone a very clear snapshot of the financial conditions of the company, what we were seeing in the market, things that were happening in the world, and how we were responding. I think another thing to call out here is our offices, if we look at the third bullet, our offices commonly work with a lot of autonomy. They have clear guidelines and KPIs, but it's not like Mike and I are checking in with those office leaders every day. Well, we're now doing that from an as-needed basis to daily. This was getting a holistic view on our active sales, our pipeline, the risk profile of our active projects in our portfolio. While many companies were freezing all CapEx projects, what were our financial projections for a forward-facing quarter, risk management in general, people issues that were coming up. We've backed this off now to about twice a week, but coming into March and April, daily meetings. So if we can go to the next slide. Again, a lot of interesting elements on this slide. I'll pick one or two. When we were in person, if we look at bullet 1, we had a practice of a daily stand-up meeting where every individual in an office, we'd come together, stand in a circle, and we'd share good news, celebrate project events, talk about events for the day or guests. Not everybody spoke because we keep this meeting to about 3 to 5 minutes. We're still doing those virtually. And that's provided the visibility. We've all seen the gallery view on Zoom, so you get to see people's faces. I found it actually neat because instead of having to travel to offices, I felt like I could just teleport in to any of our offices and join that group. Lesson learned there. Some of the things that we've done for the programming of that got more personal, like we'd have a theme day to share gratitude or for people to talk about a hobby or do a show and tell. So that allowed people to get more personal connections with each other. And it also kept the programming fresh. Virtual pair lunches was another interesting adjustment that I'll hit on. At one point, Carl had created this benefit several years ago, our founder Carl, where Atomic would pay for a lunch for you to take any colleague out to that lunch, and you could only do that once a month with that specific colleague. If you really wanted to, you could almost go to lunch with a different colleague every day and submit your expense, get that lunch paid for. The general rule was not to talk about work-related things, but to get to know each other better as people. And with the physical distancing, social distancing practices, that wasn't happening. So we decided to flip it inside out and say, look, we want to pay you for your time to do it. Everybody bring your own lunch. And that was a nice benefit for people to feel, hey, as part of my workday job, part of my job is to really connect with my colleagues and get to know them as people and maintain those relationships. So any other questions on these bullets we could hit in the Q&A. And then very briefly, as we go to the next slide, I wouldn't be representing a tech company if I didn't have a slide with interesting tech tools we're needing. We're planning on sharing these slides out, so if people have questions about any of these tools, we can answer those, but it'll provide a nice reference. And then finally, there's also in the last slide, I've provided some links to check out. One, the culture framework that I spoke to, very, very interesting. Carl's giving talks on this culture framework if anyone's interested. Some stuff I wrote about putting that culture out as true north during the crisis. The third link is much more team level hacks and tools we've been using. Discord's a really interesting tool coming out of the video game world to keep just voice connections, and our team is doing very, very interesting stuff with that. The Center for Positive Organizations out of University of Michigan's Ross School of Business is put together a playbook which hits on many elements we spoke of here today. Atomic is part of the consortium. I participated in this action group over the summer, so there's lots of great resources there for you. And then also this last link really hits on how remote cultures that are very effective will sometimes move to an asynchronous model of communication and staying together. We're intentionally staying just inside of going fully asynchronous because we want to come back to an in-person remote culture, but some interesting elements to hit on there so you can be intentional about how you're asking people to design their workday. So Cindy, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
This has been great information, and I just want to thank all three of you, Rick, Dr. Kim, and Sean. Thank you for your presentations. And as we begin the question and answer portion of our session, I'd like to remind you that if you do have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box, and we will get through as many as time allows. If we're not able to get through them all, we're going to go ahead and follow up the questions to our panelists, and then we will send you the answers and send all the answers to all the participants in the future. So I would like to start out by first asking a question to all three of our panelists. All of you instituted plans based on and that are focused on employee well-being to assist your employees during this time. What advice do you have for employers who might not have a specific plan yet, even though we're 7 months into the pandemic and there's no end in sight right now? And why don't we start going in the order that we did before, Rick, Dr. Kim, and then Sean.
Sure. Well, I think there's lots of resources that can help you. Sean just illustrated several of them in his presentation. I would say that it's never too late to start. I think we're at a bit of an inflection point coming out of the summer, and that's why I'm so concerned about the next 4 to 5 months. You know, you see it even absent COVID. You see challenges during these timeframes with depression, mental health, et cetera. And so I think it's critical that you get started. I think people will recognize the event, the intentionality. We've seen great participation rates and all the things that we've done. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's the important thing. It's really start small. It will build. And I think you'll be really pleased that you did.
I completely agree with that. I was thinking, you know, what are you waiting for? Get started with something. You know, this is definitely the time not to let perfect be the enemy of the good. And if you're, you know, if you're not sure, start it as a pilot or in one area of your organization to see how it goes, but just, you know, start because as Rick said, he's right. You know, the COVID numbers are going back up. You know, and as Cindy said, we're going to be in this period for some time, for months to come. And so there's still plenty of time to support your colleagues.
Yeah, I'd like to echo it's getting started is way more important than thinking too long and not doing enough or not doing anything. I think there's also a balance of thinking it's all on you to do, as opposed to listening to your people and empowering them to come up with ideas, letting them articulate the need and also experiment with solutions. I think when it comes to well-being, keeping that controlled experiment mindset is also very, very interesting. Don't be afraid that new benefits or new practices are going to stay sticky for years to come. You can communicate effectively and say, we're gonna throw this at the wall for 3 months and see how it works. And this is unique to this time period we're in. So be flexible. The other thing that comes to mind finally is promoting well-being. I believe you do it because it's the right thing to do and you care about your people. But I think it's also, and I've seen anecdotes of this, it is still a competitive landscape out there for top talent. And people will remember how you treat them when times get hard. And this is a time period where you can extend trust and, well, you know, promote well-being to your teams. And I think that builds a lot of reserves into the future. And I've talked with folks who have been in businesses where they're being treated differently, whether it's an absence of communication, micromanagement, a lack of trust, and people are walking. So this is about getting through. It's about treating people well. It's about retaining your team and using the crisis as an opportunity to come out stronger.
Thank you. So the next question is unique to all three of you. But recently, Governor Whitmer's executive orders were invalidated by the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, which took effect immediately. The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services COVID-19 orders are in their place. Has this affected your organization, and how are you keeping your employees and your customers safe? Dr. Kim, if you'd like to start, then Sean and Rick.
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to start. You know, that change has not changed our practices at Mercy Health. You know, we instituted practices like entry screening, asking our colleagues to stay home if they're not feeling well, you know, the physical distancing, the masking, all the things that we did not specifically because of an executive order, but because they were the actions that our team felt were necessary and sufficient to keep our patients and our colleagues safe in this time. And so we've you know, we're sticking with it, and in our conversations with leaders for the other health systems in our area, they're doing it too. Now, the thing that all of us are seeing is that since that happened, you know, we are having people question our practices more. You know, they come to the entry screening point and they go, hey, I thought, we're cool. We didn't really have to, do that anymore. And so we're needing to remind people more that no, they're just as important now as they ever were. And in some instances, when visitors in particular have been especially insistent, we've needed to be firm and be prepared to be firm. But when it comes to the actions, they still make great sense. And as the numbers go up, it's really more important now than ever for people to be wearing masks and doing physical distancing. It worked before and it's going to work again. And so the changing the orders has not changed what we're doing.
In a similar spot, I mean, we're not working with the general public. We have very few visitors into our spaces. Right now, we still have not returned to our offices. A few select people in the organization have access to those facilities. They go there as necessary for very select activities. We're looking at a return to office plan. With all things through this pandemic, commonly we like to be the A students, be on top of things, be early and getting it done right. I found, a principle in new product development is this is a time to be a fast follower. And that is let others lead, see what works, let them be the guinea pigs, and then cautiously come behind. So our return to office plan is going to be a cautious one. It'll be phased. It's going to be very few people back. We don't have to force ourselves back there quickly to effectively do our work. And that is a position of luck and privilege that we're in. Not everybody has that. So we're not going to abuse that position or put that position at risk. And I found through all of this, as we've communicated, this situation is incredibly dynamic. It's political, it's medical. Health organizations are changing advice. We're learning our way through it. And so I've also tried to dispel any internal disputes of, I'm the expert, I read this article, I'm going to cite this or that, and say, look, we're going to look for the lowest common denominator of caution. And I won't speak as an expert, and I'm not going to argue with anybody else like they're an expert. We're going to be generally cautious, and we're going to return slowly.
Yeah, I would add to what Dr. Kim said. We made our changes prior to the executive orders coming in. We operate in 6 states. We have over 5 million customers that come through our door each week. And so we feel a real responsibility to make sure, regardless of executive orders, what works, works. And so we're not changing anything around the masks, social distancing, health screening, et cetera. We implemented those across many of our states before we had executive orders. I think it's very important. I do get calls, I'll get emails, different people feel differently about masks, et cetera. And I think, our goal is to stand firm. And I think we've seen, it took a little while as Band-Aids came out, but I think people generally are following those practices and recognize that they're going to keep everyone safe. One of the things that Dr. Kim had mentioned, we're seeing cases go up. And it's happening rapidly. I would say here, if you fast forward another 4 to 6 weeks, it's scary where we could be with the number of cases that are out there. And so anything we can do now to limit that spread, I think is critical.
And if I can build on to what that Rick just said, first, I think, Rick, you're underselling a little bit the important leadership position that Meyer took from the start of this. I think, Meyer really stood up and did the right things early on and really provided the benchmark for the rest of the community to follow. And so, we can't thank you enough for that. The second part is that I think the community overall, following Meyer's lead and hopefully others' lead, they've done a wonderful job of doing the right things to keep workplaces safe. And now I think, school safe, and when there's an outbreak, people are handling it the right way. The place where we're seeing most of the exposures occurring is actually away from work, away from, school, that for some reason, when people leave the workplace or leave school, their guard gets down or whatever, and that's really where people are getting exposed. And so, the kind of measures that we're taking at work that are successful in keeping people safe and also keeping businesses and schools and everything else open, we need to do that outside of work too. You know, we need to maintain distance. We need to keep masking. That's what it's going to take for us, you know, to get through this well. And so just wanted to put that in there.
Along those same lines, this question is going to be for Dr. Kim and Rick. Both of your organizations have a blended culture where you have employees that work in person that are essential workers, and then you also have workers who are essential as well, but are working remote. All remote is a challenge, as we all know, but how do you keep up with the culture with two different audiences?
I'm happy to go first. You know, the first is that when it comes to keeping up the culture, which again for Mercy Health is around, you know, putting patients first and supporting one another as colleagues always, that translates very well whether you're working from work or working from home. So that's been actually fairly straightforward. What's been harder is helping people feel connected and, you know, feeling a part of the community, especially our colleagues who are working from home. And so what's been really helpful for that is, like it sounds like everyone's done, you know, we've increased the formal kind of communication vehicles, and we've really gone virtual. The town halls that we used to do were ones that were in person, and you know, so now we're doing WebEx or Zoom or the various means that let everyone connect. The appreciation event, I gave you the example of around the popcorn, and we've done several of those. You know, we include our colleagues who are working from home also, you know, so that means people are getting packages delivered with it so they can participate in it. The visits that we're doing, and we create venues that enable teams to come together in the appropriate numbers and appropriate amount of distance so that they can, you know, so that they can connect. The other thing that we're finding is that, you know, there are some colleagues actually who prefer to work from home when we would prefer that they work from work, you know, and kind of, and vice versa. And so that's provided us an opportunity to really try to flex kind of roles and descriptions in a way that suit people the best. And that's been helpful too.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you can imagine store employees, and then you have office support, buyers, merchants, corporate headquarters, team members, you know, we didn't want to send a message in the middle of the pandemic that, you know, our team members are going to be in harm's way, but everybody in the corporate office is going to hunker down and et cetera. But I think, you know, there's a reality to the fact that we have different roles and different ways that we can support each other. And so we were very clear and upfront around what does that look like, and then finding ways to bridge that. So our merchants still visit the stores. We're out there supporting the stores, making sure that we're visible and making sure that our team members feel supported. And then where we can use technology, yesterday was a great example. We had about 1,000 of our team members, our store directors, leaders, combined with our merchants, really talking about the holiday season that was coming up. And we did it all virtually, where we would normally come here to Grand Rapids and have a big convention. And it was a huge hit. We tied in social media component with it, and there was ability to have social responses and everybody to connect virtually. And so I think people understand that we all have different roles and are understanding that it might be different in different areas.
Thank you. So Sean, I have to believe that you have some introverts on your team. How are they participating in the check-ins, and how do you know if they're engaged?
It's a great question. And it's funny, we haven't specifically polled on this. I think it would be interesting to say, how would you self-rank on your extroversion, introversion scale, and where are you falling in this? We're surveying a lot of our people about, are you effectively able to get your work done? Do you have the tools and equipment you need to get your work done? Do you feel adequately connected to your team? And we're seeing a lot of positive scores there. So I think we're doing well by people, regardless of where they are on that introversion, extroversion spectrum. I will say that when we were in a on-site culture, I noticed that the digital communication tools like Slack were commonly favored by more introverted people. And I think that this has provided folks, when they work in their own home environment, to have the flexibility to skew more towards their own communication preferences. The engagement piece you hit on, again, how can you see that people are being productive but not micromanaging their work, and how are they engaged? So on the topic of engagement, we've historically used Gallup's Q12 engagement survey, and we do it annually, and we just ran it, and I was shocked, really. I was ready for whatever answers, and in a culture of act transparently, I'm like, we'll accept the answers we get, we'll embrace it, and we'll move forward as we need to move forward. But we actually went up from our last participation in 2019. So we moved from like a grand mean score of 4.39 to a little bit up, 4.43. I'll take it. We had 96% participation in the survey. So it's putting us at like the 98th percentile in Gallup's database of engagement. So I feel when I zoom way out and I look at tools that are used to measure engagement, we're engaged. When I zoom in another layer lower, as a services company, we make our money through billable work, through hourly billings. And we can see that people are staying busy. We set up new tooling, new infrastructure. This was part of those daily meetings we have with our managing partners. So people are getting the work done. Our clients are staying happy. We're hearing reports of harmony coming out of our teams. The engagement scores are solid, and I'm assuming on the the tool sets, it's actually a little favoring the introversion.
Great. This is gonna be for all three of you. I'm gonna start with Sean, and then Rick, and Dr. Kim. And these are a couple of questions that are gonna be kind of smushed together here. So, Dr. Kim, you mentioned that you are encouraging your employees to take time off, and that it had to start from the top. And I know, Rick, you've mentioned things that it's got to start from the top, as well as Sean. And all of you have mentioned giving each other grace and showing that vulnerability. How are your senior leadership teams, yourself, actually doing that? Because I know, like, even with the time off example, we say employees should take time off, but we don't really actually tell you how to unplug and be able to do that. So kind of a couple of questions all in one, but I'm gonna have you take it away, Sean.
Sure, so specifically with PTO, we measured it. And we would look at, as our management team, not only those billable hours, but where were the vacation hours being spent? And we would pulse the organization to say, please remember to take it. We actually instituted a new rule this year that we asked people to take 60% of their vacation by the end of the third quarter. We didn't want people to continue to kick the ball down the road. We have a use it or lose it vacation policy because we encourage people to take that time off to unplug and restore. And so we managed it. And I can say, even closely managing it, not everyone was able to meet the rule. We also, in some of our internal tooling, we use, Rick, I think you talked about using Yammer. Atomic uses a communication platform called Slack, solves a very similar problem. And we have Slack channels about vacations, pandemic-based recreational activities, who's doing what. So we promoted people sharing how to unplug. And then we made sure our managers and our leaders were also active on those channels and also taking that time to restore. I could say individually, it's been hard. Even to try and hold myself to that, it's been hard. There's just a lot to do. And even when you are unplugging, oftentimes it's a lot of change as leaders in all of our personal lives, and we're managing at home. So it's just a tough year.
Yeah, I would say, not to get into the vacation time, we've had the same issues. I think it's very difficult. People look out and go, I really don't want to take a vacation right now. What am I going to do? So we've allowed some flexibility to roll vacation time into next year as well, just so that they don't feel like, that 2-3 months where we were all heads down trying to run the business, that they got to kind of take a vacation when they really didn't want to. To your point around grace and setting the example, I've taken that to heart personally. So I've personally made sure that I take vacations. I actually am taking one next week, even though I would probably rather be here just doing the things that we're doing, but I think it's important that we set the example. I mentioned mental health and, things like that. Being able to say, I was on a call with a lot of people on the call just saying, I don't know about you, but I'm exhausted at the end of the day. I'm more exhausted now on a Zoom day than I am being in the office. And I'm worried about, how am I going to stay energized and excited as we go into the holiday season. So, I think it is important to kind of share where you're at. Everybody's dealing with different things. I think we've seen a lot of that. And I think that goes a long way to helping kind of move some of these initiatives forward.
For us, it was similar. And, the three buckets that I put it in is first, we told folks to do it, to use PTO to take care of themselves, and that we would do it. And then we held one another accountable to do it. The second thing we did is we shared about what we're doing. I mean, to some respects, I probably overshared about, some of the things that I was doing. And the third thing is that at some point, everyone gets tired and they know that they need to do it. And the first two kind of means that they understand that that's okay. And just a funny story about it is, earlier I shared how one of the things we did is we created an incident command structure just to coordinate everything and to try to flatten the organization so we could make decisions quickly. And our incident command was two teams. We started saying, hey, we'll call it team 1 and team 2, but no one wanted to be on team 2. And then we went to A and B, but who wants to be on the B team? And so then it was colors. Purple and green is what we landed on, because those are the Trinity Health colors. And we couldn't do maize and blue or green and white, for Pete's sakes. And the idea is that when the purple team was on, the green team, would work regular hours and do regular stuff. And early on, we discovered that when the purple team was on, the green team was still there, and vice versa. And so there was one of the meetings where we said, we got to talk about why, we have two teams, but everyone's still here, and to hold ourselves accountable to that. And in terms of, kind of the oversharing part of it, is one of the health habits I have is that I have a workout routine that I do in the morning, typically like at 5 in the morning, which is why 11 p.m. is too late for me. And I shared very openly during one of the town halls is that, with everything being so busy and just trying to take care of our patients and our colleagues, I found that I just didn't have time even at 5 in the morning to do it. But what I resolved is that at a minimum, what I would do is if I have to cut the time or the distance in half on my running days, I would do it. But I would do it faster, so that I got somewhat of a workout, but that I would do something. And so I shared that, and a lot of our colleagues share with you that, oh, you know what, that made a big difference, and I resolved to do it. And one of the other things I shared is that, I get confused because there's so much going on and so much complexity, and who knows what the CDC is going to say, and the HHS and the state and whatever. And how I hearken back to the Covey 7 habits, which is, hey, really, you only focus on what's in your sphere of influence, and what a difference that made. And so I shared about those kinds of things. And then the third thing that our team did was, during some of our meetings, they would make a point of saying, well, Dr. Kim is on PTO now, but if he were here or in this other meeting, he said this kind of a thing. So people are like, oh, he's taking PTO, so kind of sharing in that way. And when it comes to just, we're human. And so the adrenaline, only lasts for so long. We feel it ourselves. And when we see it in each other, we would just express genuine concern, just as you would do with a friend or a family member. And in the way that our culture says, say, hey, you seem different. And people would say, I do. And then that would help with them, with the PTO and taking care of yourself.
This question is going to be for all three of you. Do you have a set policy on set start and end times? I know, I believe it was Rick that said no 12 to 1. You kept that open. Is there a set policy, or are you relying on your supervisors and leadership teams and your employees themselves to make sure that they shut off at a certain time?
Yeah, we don't have set policies. I think we're, people, especially our leaders, I mean, they do the work that they've got to get done and work through those timeframes. I think we are trying to be more specific. I wouldn't call it a policy, but a general practice to say, hey, we all need time during the day to take a bit of a break. It's very, before you used to end a meeting, you go to the restroom, you go down the hall, you'd walk to the next meeting room. Now you just press a button and you're in another Zoom call. And so, things like take that hour for lunch, give yourself time to decompress. Don't feel guilty about sitting down with your spouse or your kids that might be schooling at home and have lunch. And so, we have to set the example. So my meetings have to represent that, as well as, the ending a little bit early so that you can transition to the next meeting. So I would say it's just more general practice. And, if we see abuse of that, we certainly will talk to our leaders. I think there was a quick question that came over in the chat. How do you shut it off? And that's what I probably worry about the most is people are at home at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock. And I got one at 3 in the morning this morning where someone was sending me something. And I think probably you need to spend time equally on that, helping people to understand. I know your office is at home, but it's okay to, turn down the laptop and engage with your family. The business will be there tomorrow. And I think some people have trouble shutting that off, which is also an issue.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And because people are working from home, and we have Zoom, and it's harder than ever. And the things that my leadership team has tried to do is to set boundaries for ourselves. And it really does start with leaders walking the talk. And so for me, I changed my habits a lot. And so being an early bird, my team knew that I would start it on the previous day things pretty early in the morning, but I changed it so that during the week I start responding to emails and things at 7, and I stopped doing it around 4 or 5, and on Fridays I stop at 3 in the afternoon. And everyone on the team knows that if there's something urgent that they want me to look at, they can send me a text message to do it. But I've adhered to that. I've adhered to that schedule. The second thing that we do is, being a health system, we have an administrator on-call system anyway. We had that before. And so we always knew that, well, if I'm not the AOC, I know that so-and-so who's on the AOC is going to handle it. If something comes up that, they'll let us know. And we use that as an example to remind all of our leaders throughout the organization that being a part of this organization means you're a part of a team with other people who are committed to the same things that you are. And so that lets us rely on one another to cover and make sure the right things get done when we're not on. And so those are the kind of things that, have helped us. And for me, I'm not, people know I'm not above responding to someone who sends me the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. email saying, oh, I noticed you sent this email at 3 a.m., that's pretty early, anything I can do to help, are you okay, and so, you get interesting replies when you send notes like that.
Yeah, I can chime in. We don't have a specific policy on timing and when people are available or not available. Commonly, it's 7:30, 8 a.m. to 5, 6 p.m. culture. We've commonly had a emphasis on sustainable pace and people not working crazy hours or late into the night. That can happen in some more different tech communities that are more startup based, limited runway, always on, you're going to go big or go home. We're running a sustainable company where we want our people to have time for renewal and well as professional development. So we're already attuned to unplugging, restoring, and learning in those evening hours or weekends. I can say for our leaders and managers that weren't doing the client-specific work, there was so much change coming at us. It was a bit of an always on. I changed my notifications. Sometimes I would silence like my notifications in the evenings. They were always on because I felt like I had to stay on top of things. And now we're moving into a period where we're seeing a lot of the Zoom fatigue really set in. So we're starting to experiment with some of those other practices, like what's your Zoom budget for a day, for a week? Can we end meetings early? Can we do things more over voice or phone calls than the video up all the time?
Thank you. All right, we have time for one last quick question and quick answer if you could help us out. We have a lot of employers and companies in West Michigan that are pretty small, 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 employees. Is there 1 or 2 priority items that you could share with them on what they should focus on implementing regarding this topic?
I'd just throw one thing out because every organization is different, so I wouldn't say one or the other. one of the things that I was just blown away by was, instead of feeling like I had to have all the answers or my senior leadership team needs to have the answers, we went to the team and assembled a representative group from the team and said, you know, what do you need? What are the things? These are the areas that we're concerned about, and then allowed them to think freely, gave them a bit of a budget to be able to work through it. And it was amazing the answers that we got and how we were able to really activate against that in a way that would have never happened if we'd have just kept it with, I have to have all the answers. And so I would say, regardless of the organization size, get a group together, get your team together, and get them thinking and collaborating, and it'll be amazing what they can come up with.
Thank you.
Yes, I would agree with that. And this is a wonderful time for an organization, no matter the size, to really, you know, review what are we here to do? Who are we here to serve? And, you know, the communities that we're here to serve in this particularly, you know, unprecedented time, you know, what is it that we can do that serves their needs the best? It's wonderfully renewing to use this opportunity to do that, both for the short term and also for the longer term. That really helps provide clarity on, you know, what you do, why you do, and how you do it, both now and, you know, in the future. So I suggest that.
I echo both of those points. With a team that small, this is a time to either strengthen, change, or find your purpose. Do that as a group together to find what's going to bind you together with a common cause. And look to your team, because you're going to be able to bring out attributes and bring out the best in people, their ability to lead, their creativity, their tenacity to get through this. So don't miss the opportunity in the crisis if you have a small organization, and be a rallying moment, and really grow those bonds for the team once we're on the other side of this.
I could speak with all three of you for hours, so I appreciate the time that you've taken with us. But unfortunately, we're getting close to the end of our program. With challenge comes opportunity, and it's been an extreme honor for me to be able to help you get your message out to West Michigan and further regarding culture. And as a reminder, if we did not answer your question, we're going to forward those questions to our panelists, and we'll be following up with you very shortly. Now I'd like to bring back our CEO, Birgit Close, for any additional thoughts before we officially end our program.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Unfortunately, my video is not working, but I'm here. And what a fantastic panel. I want to join Cindy in saying not only thank you, but wow, I could be listening to the three of you for a lot longer. Authentic, transparent. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with all of the folks on this call. It was fantastic. And I also have to say, you are indicative of the great leadership that we enjoy having in our businesses in West Michigan. I'm so proud to be part of this community, and you are fantastic leaders. And I want to thank Rick and Dr. Kim and Sean, just outstanding. Thanks for the great ideas. And we will be sharing the presentation. It will be posted on our website, and the link will be sent to every participant. So, but also share it with others, because you have your own networks. And I hope what you heard today will help you guide your teams through this pandemic. We're in month 8, but I agree with all three panelists. I don't think we've seen the end yet, and we're heading into the dark parts of our year, and keeping our folks well is our #1 responsibility as leaders. So thank you very much, everybody, from the bottom of my heart. This was fantastic. And goodbye to everyone on the call. See you next month.